This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Our goal with our videos is to empower you to be able to do the repairs on your own and save a whole lot of money and also get that great feeling of having fixed it by yourself. Today we have a Meile dishwasher that is having a filling problem. It tends to overfill. Just testing the drain system right now. The drain system looks really good, but this one does a cycle, but at the end of the cycle, when they open up the door, the customer notices that after some time has elapsed, there's a lot of water inside, and sometimes it floods over onto the kitchen floor. And this is because the water inlet valve is malfunctioning and it's not closing all the way, so water's kind of sneaking into the dishwasher. When I tested it, running it did a good job. It filled up to the right level, which is where the water's just below the white plastic filter handle, so that was perfect. But when the cycle's all done, water keeps creeping in, and this means it's time to replace the water inlet valve. The one you can get from Meile are pretty expensive. This one's very expensive. I noticed on eBay it was $350, and this is kind of what the unit looks like. But it's actually, there's a faster and easier and much cheaper way to get this machine going again with a different kind of a fill valve, kind of a cheap generic fill valve that actually works better. There's one here from Amazon that's only $18.90 and does a really good job. I've done this on a whole bunch of machines, and this is giving people 7 to 8 years of service. You also need this little brass elbow we see at the end of this hose. You can get this whole hose assembly, but you really just need that brass elbow at the end. They're pretty cheap. So to do this procedure is pretty inexpensive and will only take you about half an hour. So the first thing to do is make sure that your dishwasher is unplugged. And here is a part number from one of the fill valves I use. They're all kind of similar. They're just cheap generic ones. You also need this brass elbow which connects to the fill valve. I'm going to put a little of this white Teflon thread tape on this bigger part of the elbow. There's a smaller aperture and a bigger aperture. This is on the bigger one, and this is the part that screws into your new fill valve. This procedure is also pretty fun to do because you don't have to take the dishwasher out of the cabinet. You can just do this all basically underneath the sink where the fill valve normally is going to be hanging out. That's how we remove the old one and how we put in the new one. So we're going to make sure that this tape is on, the thread's nice. We're going to feed it into the new fill valve. So the fill valve does not come with this brass elbow. You've got to buy this separately and then put it on. I'm going to get it on there really tight. I'm going to grab the whole fill valve with my vice grips and then use some pliers. You could also use a crescent wrench, would work great. We're going to spin this brass elbow on a few good turns to make sure it's super tight. Watertight's really good. And then we're going to remove the old fill valve that's malfunctioning. Sometimes these fill valves don't open anymore, or sometimes they won't close all the way. This one wasn't closing. So I'm going to turn the water supply off, make sure it's really off, tightly off, so that no water can leak. And then I'm going to go ahead and spin off the hose. And I'll put a little towel down because some water is going to leak out. And I'll remove the hose from the fill valve. I'm going to reuse this hose, this braided metal hose. When you buy the brass elbow that connects to the fill valve, it may come with a new hose, and you can use that. It doesn't have to be a short one like this. I'm using a standard head screwdriver to pry apart this plastic case. And this is the old fill valve. So again, they're pretty expensive. I'm going to pull back on this sheath, and I'm going to use a pair of vice grips to kind of hold it back to give me some room to work. I'm going to use a standard head screwdriver to pry this wire out away from the old fill valve, and I'm going to cut it with a pair of diagonal pliers or wire cutters. I'm going to pull this wire out because I want to use this wire again. I'm going to go back about probably 8 to 10 inches. I'm going to use my diagonal pliers to cut through this old hose. I'm cutting it back a little ways. They give you a lot of extra hose on the Meile fill valve hose. And again, I'm just using my diagonal pliers to cut. And now we have separated the old fill valve. We're going to get ready to install the new one. I'm going to use my pliers to take the spring clamp off of the old hose. This part's a little tricky. Just take your time. I'm going to feed it onto the hose. That's going to help to clamp it on. I've already stripped the wire back. There's 2 wires that you have to strip back about 1/4 inch, and then you want to braid the wires. You want to twist them so they're nice and tight. I'm going to put on 2 new spade connectors. You can get these at an electrical supply store, or Amazon sells them. They're really cheap. And I'm going to crimp on these spade connectors with my wire crimping tool. You could use a pair of pliers to do that too, or vice grips to crush it on. You can do the same thing on the other side. And these are the wires that are bringing power to the fill valve. I'm going to use some electrical tape to cover the metal part of these spade connectors because I don't want them to touch anything under the sink. I want to make sure that there's no chance of a short circuit or a spark, so I'm going to cover them up. Get that on nice and tight. We'll do it on the other side also. And now we're ready to connect the fill hose to the new fill valve. Get that on finger tight, and then use some pliers or a wrench to get a couple more spins to get it really tight. This is a compression fitting, so you do not have to use the thread tape on this part. I'm going to push the old hose onto the new fill valve. I'm going to kind of wiggle and push, get it seated as far as it'll go. And I'm going to feed, using the pliers, I'll feed the spring clamp onto it. Putting the electrical connectors on now onto the fill valve. There's 2 of them. And make sure they're on there nice and secure. Take off the vice grips to release the cover tube. And now we're going to go ahead and take that and put it onto the house water supply. So we're just getting that. We got that on finger tight. Now we're going to use a wrench to get it super tight. Turn on the water, make sure there's no leaks. And I used a Phillips head screw to attach the valve to the wood inside there to keep the fill valve up and secure. Looks good. This is just a bunch of copper wires, and it creates an electromagnetic field, and it pulls a pin, and the pin goes like this, and then here's water coming in from the house, and it shoots into the dishwasher. But then at the end, a spring closes this thing, and it stops the water. But in our case, it didn't fully close, so water was sneaking past. And that's why we got this overflow. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this gets your Meile dishwasher going again and avoids the overfilling and flooding. Pretty easy procedure. Please go ahead and subscribe when you get a chance too. Thanks a lot for watching.